Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for joining so punctually. We're just going to give everybody 30 seconds or so to make their way from the waiting room into the main webinar for this afternoon. We're joined by lots of fantastic panelists from the University of Southampton who are going to be taking us through a taster session for psychology today. During the session, there is going to be the opportunity for you to ask questions. So you will see at the bottom of your screen that there is a Q&A function. Please do ask questions as you go through today's session, but we will also end with a nice 10 minutes to get as many questions answered live by our panelists as we possibly can. But I won't take up any more of your time this afternoon. I'm going to hand over to our fantastic speakers from the University of Southampton, and I hope you all enjoy today's session. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Sylwia Cisek, and I am admission tutor for the School of Psychology. And I would like to welcome you very cordially to this webinar today. And we're very happy that you've managed to find time and wanted to join us. And today we're going to talk to you a little bit about what it means to become a psychologist and where the career can take you if you decide that you want to study psychology. And you will have a chance to especially focus on clinical psychology because we've got so many questions about this, but also on research psychology. And this is why today we are here with clinical psychologist Lynn Elliott, and she will talk to you about possible careers in clinical psychology. And Guido and his student Chloe will actually talk to you a little bit about the research. So Guido, can I ask you to share the slides for today?
Yes, except for some reason, it seems to not be working.
I can see the slides on my screen. If that's
Okay,
any help.
there we go. That's where we were. Yes, slides are shared.
Okay, lovely, fantastic. So as you can see, this is the plan for today. So I already mentioned we will start from telling you a little bit about where you can go if you decide to graduate with psychology title, and then we'll talk a little bit more about clinical psychology. And that's because during the open days and visit days, and when we visit colleges and schools with our demo talks, this is the most common question. People really want to understand if they have to go through the whole PhD program, or if there are any other opportunities for them to work within the field of clinical psychology. And as I said later on, you will have a taster, and we chose for today a study that maybe this is a kind of research that maybe is not the most traditionally taught about what psychology research is about. And we chose it to show you that psychology is so much more than the traditional scope that we always think about, and that we can do so many fantastic things and look at humans from so many different perspectives, still strongly within the psychology field. So to not waste much time, Guido, can you open the next slide, pretty please? So I want to tell you a little bit about what you can do after graduating from psychology. I'm not going to talk about clinical because Lina will do it a bit more in details in a moment. But the most common after this, I probably think for everyone would be thinking about developmental and educational psychology. That's because we're used to know the psychologists in schools that support our development and our education. But that's not only limited to schools, because this span of development, it lasts throughout our lives. And the same is with our needs to get new knowledge for educational needs. So you can work with very young people, but you can also work with adult people, and you can also work with elderly people to support any problems that they may have, and to make they thrive and harness all of their skills in the best possible way. And you can see on the slide some examples of what your titles could be. So that's one way, but then we can also go and support our justice system. And this is very popular also for our students. They quite often ask about forensic and criminal psychology pathway. And this is where you can either focus on helping to understand, if someone could have been involved in all sorts of crimes and why, and to help profile the typical personality. But also, and maybe most importantly, we want to work to make those people don't go into crime again if it already happened. So we want a rehabilitation process to be as efficient as only possible. And again, you have some examples of what your titles could be if you decide to go into this direction. Then, because psychology is so much focused on our motivation, our decision-making processes, our respond to how we respond to other people, small groups, in big group, in different social settings. Obviously, it's also used whenever we talk about our work environment. So for people to work effectively, to not burn out, to be assessed in a proper way, to be motivated, to achieve the best that they can achieve, we need psychologists to support them. And also it can be used in marketing, it can be used in designing, it can be used in so many different areas that maybe we don't think as traditionally psychological. But wherever humans do something, wherever we're going to use something, we have to understand how we perceive it, how we process information. It's all very important. And then, of course, I'm biased a little bit because that's my career path, is also academic and research pathway where you can do the research as my colleagues that will talk to you today. And if you got any more questions about this, we're all very happy to answer these questions at the end. But do not waste more of your time. I know that a lot of you want to hear about clinical psychology. Lynn will tell you more about this.
Thank you, Sylvia. Hello, everyone. My name's Lynn Ellett. I'm a professor of psychology and mental health, and I'm also a clinical psychologist here at the University of Southampton. And as Sylvia has already said, we know that a lot of you out there at this stage are really keen on clinical psychology and have aspirations to become clinical psychologists. And I actually remember when I was at your stage myself, I absolutely knew that clinical psychology was the career path for me. And so I thought I'd just spend a couple of minutes talking to you a little bit about that. So next slide, please, Guido. So just to give you a bit of a flavour about what clinical psychologists do, the answer to that question is that we do a lot of things. So not only do we assess people that have a range of mental health problems such as anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, we also deliver different types of therapies that help them to manage mental health conditions. One of the unique things about being a clinical psychologist is that you're trained to help people across the full lifespan. So it might be a child or an adolescent that's having problems with anxiety. It might be an adult or older adults as well. So it's the full spectrum of the lifespan that we help people with their mental health conditions. But as well as doing therapy, we also do a lot of research because we have to make sure that the help that we're offering people is evidence-based, that it will help them to feel better. And we also engage in a range of other roles. So we educate people, we teach people to become clinical psychologists. We evaluate the services that we offer in the NHS. We consult with other professionals such as psychiatrists, nurses, occupational therapists. We take various leadership roles in the NHS and academia, and we also supervise therapists as well. And basically, to become a clinical psychologist, you first have to do an undergraduate degree, so a bachelor's degree in psychology. And then after you've done that 3 years, it's then another 3 years doctorate to become a clinical psychologist. And as part of that doctorate, you do clinical placements where you do therapy and learn to be a clinical psychologist, as well as conduct research and do a range of academic assessments as part of that 3-year doctorate as well. But the other thing I wanted to sort of convey is that there are lots of different career paths if you're interested in clinical psychology. So becoming a clinical psychologist is one, but there are a range of other opportunities as well. And Guido, could you take me on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So there are lots and lots of psychological professions. So we have what are called psychological practitioners. So psychological wellbeing practitioners work with adults with mild to moderate anxiety and depression. We also have a range of practitioners, so education mental health practitioners and what we call CWPs. They work with children and adolescents, and we now have mental health support services that are located in schools and colleges. We also have a range of psychological therapists. So there are people that specialise in delivering psychotherapy for children and adolescents. We also have psychological therapists that focus specifically on cognitive behaviour therapy. And then there are, alongside clinical psychologists, there are a range of other practitioner psychologists. So you can become a health psychologist to help support people with their physical health needs. There are also counselling psychologists who are similar to clinical, and also forensic psychologists, as Sylvia has mentioned. So there are a huge range of really exciting and varied and interesting psychological professions. And if you want to know more about this, if you put psychological professions network into a Google search, you'll be able to learn more about the different types of psychological professions that are out there. So I hope that's been helpful in giving you a bit of a flavour about clinical psychology and what the career paths might be. And I'll now hand over to Guido to take you through the next part of the webinar. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks, Lynn. And I don't think, Sylvia, you want to say anything on this, right? Okay, so hi, everyone. Yes, I'm here because I do a lot of basic and applied research, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about the research bit today. Indeed, a lot of our undergrad students, such as Chloe here today, go on to research style careers, right? So psychology is not just a profession, it's also a science. And one of the things that well, the main focus of psychology is to understand how the brain and the mind works. And so here in Southampton, we do a bunch of research across many different subfields of psychology, neuroscience, perception, cognition, social psychology. And there's a lot of really excellent researchers who are also lecturers and professors and teach in the university. And so meet one of our researchers, you get to meet today. And to begin with, I can tell you a little bit of who I am. And first of all, I come from the lovely Italian city of Genova. You might notice by my name, I'm Italian. And Genova is a town with a stunning seaside, a rich history, and a rich culinary tradition, which is one of the reasons why I particularly liked to cook. And in Genova, I received undergraduate training in biomedical engineering. So that's kind of also already kind of a quirk of psychology. You see it attracts people from all different disciplines and many different fields. So I received undergraduate training in biomedical engineering, whereas I received my doctoral training in visual neuroscience from University College London. However, most of my PhD, my doctoral studies, were done in departments of ophthalmology and psychology in Boston, as I enrolled in an off-campus PhD program with this guy right here, Professor Peter Becks, which you can see here, I think, pretending to know what the kids are up to these days. So that was my PhD supervisor. And then after my PhD, I spent 6 years working as a postdoctoral researcher in a lab in Germany under the supervision of the guy in the sunglasses, Professor Roland Fleming, who you can see is also not a very serious individual, but actually is a really remarkable researcher. And finally, since February 2023, I've taken up a lecturer position at the School of Psychology here in Southampton, where I have a series of roles and responsibilities. I am module lead specifically, I guess the thing that's more relevant, on the Empirical Studies 2 module. here I teach students how to design and conduct kind of a larger scale research project like the ones that third year undergraduate students need to conduct to finish their studies. And then I give lectures in other modules, including behavioral neuroscience, perception, and cognition, that kind of cover a lot of my research interests. And so my background, as I said, is quite varied. And you can also see this by this sort of network plot where you see the range of topics I've been working on throughout my career. The size of the dots here represents my output in terms of like research papers, and the thickness of the lines represents the overlap between the different topics. And what you'll find is that at my core, given this range of interests, I am a vision scientist. So I am interested in understanding how our sense of sight works. And my primary research goal is to understand the link between perception and action using computational methods. And so for this reason, much of my postdoctoral work and my developing research program in Southampton have focused on examining visually guided hand motor control. So how we use the images that come in through our eyes, how these are processed by the brain to compute the commands that then the brain sends down to our arms and hands and allows us to reach and pick up objects and interact with them. So visually guided hand motor control. To give a bit of more of an overview of what I mean by this, using vision, so as I said, our sense of sight, to guide our hands towards objects is a challenging task. And roboticists, right, from my background in engineering, roboticists also know this very well. And visually guided robotic grippers can even drop even simple items like this pepper here. Whereas they can also experience great difficulty with complex, slippery, deformable objects like these fish. Humans like us instead can largely perform such complex tasks, but we're not born with this facility. We learn to use vision to guide our hand movements during development. However, to successfully grasp and manipulate objects, we also need to learn some harsh truths about the physical behavior of the objects in the world, such as that ice cream can topple off its cone, or that balls tend to actually roll, or that Jenga can sometimes be an extreme sport. And so the overarching theme that guides ongoing work in my lab is how do we combine vision with mental simulation and prediction processes to guide our hands towards objects and grasp them and do stuff act in the world. To study this, my group focuses also heavily on developing behavioral research methods. For example, my lab hosts a state-of-the-art motion capture system, and by placing little reflective markers on the back of participants' hands, we can track whole hand motions. And we can also track the 3D position of 3D printed objects for which we have co-registered 3D models. And so what you can see here is we can reconstruct whole hand and object motions. And so here's one example of the kind of data we collect in my lab, where participants are grasping objects made out of composite materials, such as made out of wood and brass and things like that. And we try to understand whether and how humans can predict the physical behavior of these kinds of objects as they're interacting with them. And so the videos here are reconstructed movements shown from different perspectives. And we can capture this kind of data for objects in which we vary, for example, here the material configuration and or the positioning of the objects compared to the actor, compared to the person, right? To try to understand how we adapt to these different conditions and how we learn the physical behavior of these objects through interaction with them. And in further work, we've also been combining these kind of motion capture systems with computer vision models of human hands that can replicate even soft tissue deformations, such as these examples here, And so by doing this, we can go from a tracked grasp movement to a sort of sparse point-like reconstruction to sort of full 3D soft body reconstructions of movements. And so this allows us to measure how, for example, the surface of our hands molds itself to the surface of an object, which allows for a much richer and kind of holistic characterization of hand-object interaction in the real world, but also in virtual worlds. And I mention virtual and augmented reality because my PhD student Fabrizio Lepori has been streaming our motion tracking data into a VR headset in real time and has been developing methods to co-register virtual and real objects. And this last semester, he's actually co-supervised multiple undergraduate dissertation projects that have conducted VR experiments where we try to induce perceptual illusions of weight. We try to trick participants in feeling objects as if they have different weights. And in this setup, Fabrizio can do all sorts of fun manipulation, like changing the size, shape, or material appearance and behavior of the VR objects that are tied, however, to real counterparts, so that you can kind of mess with participants' internal models of the world and object behavior. So that's quite fun. And then in another ongoing project in the lab, a very talented master's student who recently got his funding for a PhD and will continue this work for his PhD is trying to measure even mental images. So if you've heard of the concept of mental imagery before, it's basically the world of our imagination, right? And some people are able to imagine images quite vividly. You might be able to close your eyes and imagine the face of a friend, and you might feel like you can really see that face in front of you. Some people instead really struggle with doing this and say that they don't have very good mental images at all. And being able to study and understand this process is really interesting to psychology in general. But so far, most of the methods that measure mental imagery are actually just questionnaire-based methods. So basically, you just ask people to tell you whether they have vivid mental imagery or not. And what we're trying to do with Psy here is instead come up with computational methods that can actually measure the actual images inside of your head, which I think is very fun and exciting. Another line of research instead that combines kind of visual perception with motor control is trying to develop testing efficient testing methods in clinical populations. So patients that have eye diseases, macular degeneration or glaucoma, have vision loss, but they also might have cognitive deficits because they're aging populations and they might have cognitive issues, or they might also have motor control issues. And so we're trying to develop testing methods that are kind of quick, easy to do in clinical settings and that maybe all in one go might be able to tease apart how your vision works from how your motor control works from how your cognitive system works. And this is also a PhD project that's funded and starting this next semester. And then the last project that is going on in the lab currently, I think, is from our great undergraduate student, Chloe Lam. Chloe is here with us today, and I think she can take over and tell you guys a little bit about her project. Thank you, Chloe.
Thank you, Guido. Yep. So, hi guys. I am a final year psychology student here at the University of Southampton, and next year I'm going to start my master plus PhD on my research project. You can see on the screen. So this is a research project I start in my second year, which I received a undergraduate research funding grant prize. So basically what we want to do is we use some really cool AI stuff, some deep learning computational model stuff, and we're trying to understand how vision impairments, for example, if you have a blurry visions, to perceive facial expressions, emotions. So during my research years, back to my second year, we recruit participants to invite them to our labs, and then we ask them to wear some simulations impairment glasses, so they will have a reduced vision, and then ask them to generate some facial expression faces using our software. And then you can see on the screen, this is actually the facial expressions that the participants see during the experiment, and then we basically ask them to generate some facial expressions that match with emotions, so we can compare between how the facial expression is actually different when you see the face clearly with your normal visions and with vision impairment. And kind of like a long-term goal, as well as my long-term research goal, is I really want to improve the quality of life of vision impairments patients populations. So from understanding how they perceive the faces or emotions differently on a day-to-day basis during communications, we could potentially invent something cool to help them read faces more clearly or recognize faces clearly, but that's obviously need a lot of work to do during my PhD years. So this so you can see like Guido has introduced us a lot of science. So in Southampton and also other institutions, psychology is actually quite a research-based study. You will understand a lot of things about psychology on all sort of fields, with a lot of empirical study from papers, like academic papers that about experiments, and all sort of cool research that all the researchers from the world do. So throughout my almost 3 years of undergraduate here, apart from the very cognitive side of psychology, I also get a chance to learn a lot of things about clinical psychology, developmental psychology, even social psychology, health psychology. So actually, it's like psychology degree is a really broad science, and it can lead you to so many ways. From my current research of emotion regulations, I actually get an internship as a software developing startup company this semester. And I act as a researcher there to do literature review, which is some research in empirical studies all over the world, to help them invent their software to help people how to improve emotions management and regulation skill. So this is a little bit of the industry and the business world where a psychology degree can take you. But of course, also if you're interested in all sort of research, in Southampton specifically, there's a lot of volunteer research internships or like research assistant opportunity where you can basically receive supervisions of our lecturer and then help them to do some experiments, laboratory. I work with Guido since first year, and then I get a chance to do some very quick experiments with the PhD student, even postdoc researcher. And I even got a chance to go to the conference, and so it's like conference that where the researchers sharing their research and their progress of work, and you can talk to a lot of scientists and also present your work to the crowd. It's a wonderful experience, and this is a really cool side of psychology I really like. So building up from like the degree, you can be a researcher, we can be a PhD student, or you can use all sort of skills that you work in the industry. As an industry, you can also be a researcher and help company to do experiments. So there's a lot of cool stuff that you can take with a psychology degree. Yeah, thank you.
That's really great, Chloe. Thank you so much. And yeah, to really just drive home this point about conducting research, I wanted to just kind of end with the fact that the module that I lead, this Empirical Studies 2 module, I don't know where the 2 comes from, so I tend to call it the Vengeance. But this Empirical Studies module, I actually wanted to design it because it's the module that prepares students for their year 3 research project. I wanted to do a research project with the students in class, and so I decided to instead of having students do kind of boring exercises and exam, I figured we could design and run a real research study with a whole class of 200 students as participants, as experimenters. And so over the last couple of years, this is what we've been doing in class. And so I guide students through the process of designing and executing, collecting data and analyzing data, and writing a research report, which is the final assignment for the module. And this is actual real research in the sense that I've also presented this work at scientific conferences, such as the European Conference on Visual Perception in last year. And we're writing this kind of work up for publication in scientific journals, right? So it's really hands-on research that we do. Sylvia, would you like to?
Yeah. So I will try to just make a summary, and I hope you had a good glimpse of how interesting it can be and how we can approach it from so many different angles, depending where your interest is and depending where you will see yourself in a sense of future career. But one thing will be common, no matter which career path you will choose, that during the time when you study with us, your teachers, your academic teachers, mostly will be those active researchers that are engaged in the cutting-edge research that push the science forward, and you'll become a part of this process, because what our students do in their third year project, and sometimes earlier on, when they help with us, when they become a part of our internship programs, they actually become a part of big teams where we push the science forward, where we learn new things, where before they are ever published in the academic books, they've already know all about this, and they've already working on a, one step ahead. All of this is very relevant to the real life problems. We're focused on thinking about how we can bring and harness this knowledge to the world and what we can do to benefit the life of people. But also we provide, the help for you, extracurriculum activities, all sorts of other activities that will enrich your CV, that we think we early on start to focus on your careers, on possible clinical training, possible extra experiences that will firstly inform you what you want to do, which one is your path, but also support this pathway then, because you will have all of these things to present when you're applying for the next step of your journey. And finally, our students' experience, I strongly believe, is very supportive, very collaborative, and very ambitious. So we will ask you to do a lot. And occasionally you will think, okay, this is challenging, but hopefully this will be very rewarding and you will be supported on every way, every moment of this journey. And while we work, like Southampton University, if you check us out, you will see we're a pretty big department. The School of Psychology is relatively big, but we still work making a very close-knitted community. We communicate a lot with our students. We do a lot of extra things with our students, both those which are connected to development, to learning, to their employability, but also social life and just bonding together and just working together, because we believe if we know each other well and we collaborate well, then everything is easier, both for the academic teachers and for the students. And now, guys, I'm going to open the floor for the questions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody. I mean, it sounds like an incredible course offering that you've got at the University of Southampton. It was really great to see insights into the work that students are doing and the research that they're completing throughout their studies. So it isn't just sitting in a classroom listening to somebody talk, they're going into the labs, they're completing these experiments, which I know lots of students are excited about. The Q&A has been very busy already so far, so thank you to our panellists for keeping an eye and fielding all of those different questions coming in. One question, Matty in the chat has already read my mind, because it was one that I'd picked out from the questions too, is that we've heard today about a lot of the placements that you can do during your studies, but I know for year 12 students who are in the midst of thinking about writing their personal statement potentially when they come back in the autumn term, they might be considering work experience or placement opportunities that they can include in their application. What would you suggest to students before they apply to the University of Southampton and for a psychology degree, what kind of experiences are you looking out for in a student's application, and what kind of top tips or suggestions do you have? I don't know who wants to take that question.
So I will start because it links also to some of the questions there was about what to put in your statements and so on. And what we want to see at University of Southampton is that you are really motivated, that you are enthusiastic about psychology and really ready to engage. Because we're not that worried about, you know, the teaching process. We know how to teach well. We know how to support you in every part of this journey. But what we want is to see that you are really engaged. So if you can show us the examples that show that you are not giving up easily, that you are motivated, that you are enthusiastic, that you are ready to take these extra steps and extra miles, this is the most appreciated by us. We want the people who are willing to put this extra effort, because, you know, everything else we can help you with. Lynn, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, so in terms of work experience, there are lots of options. You could volunteer with mental health charities. You could do things like befriending, all of those sorts of things. So there are some key mental health charities out there, like Mind, like Rethink. Look them up, and yeah, there are always lots of volunteering opportunities available.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's some great top tips for students, because sometimes if they're looking at about getting a placement in sort of with a clinical psychologist or somewhere like with a therapist, they can be really tricky to find. But knowing that, yeah, the charity sector has lots of volunteering opportunities available is a really great way of demonstrating their interest and commitment to a course. That's fantastic. Meg would like to know, what would a day-to-day look like as a clinical psychologist? So thinking beyond the degree, straight into the career, what would a day-to-day look like for somebody in that role?
Yeah, so I think it would depend. I mean, typically you'd be seeing individuals for one-to-one therapy that you might see 3 or 4 or 5 people in a day. So that would be 5 hours, because typically we see people for an hour at a time. There is some variability in that, but a lot of the work, yeah, would be that one-to-one clinical contact. We also run group therapies as well. So again, you might see 2 or 3 or 4 people in the morning and then run a group in the afternoon. We typically have supervision sessions to make sure that you're continuing to practice safely and effectively. So you might have an hour of supervision in a day. We typically work as part of a multidisciplinary team with psychiatrists, nurses, occupational therapists. And so there are a lot of team meetings where we meet to discuss individual cases to make sure they're getting the best care and support that's available from the team. So I hope that gives you a bit of a flavour.
Fantastic, thank you, Lynn. I know it seems to be that there's lots of budding clinical psychologists in
I
the chat
remember
today,
it well, Lydia.
Yeah.
I remember it well when I was at that stage. I knew it was what I was wanted to do, and I was absolutely committed. So yeah, it's exciting. It's a great career path.
Fantastic. Chloe, one question that I'm going to direct your way is, Salma would like to know, any tips or advice when studying psychology at uni? And considering you are in the midst of it, you're in your final year, what would your top tips be for a student?
I would say just engage and relax. So psychologist is a really broad subjects, and especially in Southampton, we offer really large variety of like different field of psychology during our program. So at the first period of time, if you like access to that many information, you might be a little bit overwhelmed, like you don't know, oh, should I become a clinical psychologist or developmental psychologist, something like that. But throughout the 3 years, you will just slowly figure out your path. And of course, trying to engage your university life. Don't stress it too much. Don't think like, oh, I need to be a super professional clinical psychologist right after I graduate, because eventually you will be there. But we have a lot of opportunity. We have great staff here, and you get a lot of internship opportunity, volunteer opportunity, even like work with charity. So just engage with the university and like relax a little bit, just enjoy the course, enjoy learning, and you will find it fun.
Wonderful. I think that's great advice, is to really immerse yourself in everything that university has got to offer. I think we think a lot about the course when we're choosing a university, and definitely you're going to be studying that course for 3 years. You want that to be the right fit for you, but there's so much more going on at a university that a student can get involved with. So that's fantastic advice, Chloe. Again, to you, Chloe, Meg wants to know what the most difficult part of sort of that transition potentially to studying psychology at degree level is. So what did you sort of move into your first year? What was initially your biggest challenge, and what top tips would you give in terms of how you overcame that?
I think the most difficult things for me is like you need to, no matter you're doing your coursework or like attend lectures, they are now basically really research intensive studies. So you will have to read some empirical paper that they are very difficult for a first year student to understand everything. And you will have so many questions pop out just by reading textbook or paper. And you need to write essay with like a lot of evidence that you need to take from real world science. So it could be a little bit difficult at the first place. But luckily first year usually is like a transition period, and then you can just learn and then like engage with your lecturers and coursework, and then you will like slowly figure it out. So I think basically like switching from a high school that like doing exam, you learn all the exam skill, but at the university you kind of have to really think in a critical mind, your understanding, evaluating your point, all these kind of things may be a little bit difficult in the beginning, but as long as you engage with your coursework, with your lecturer, you will be fine. You're gonna be fine.
Fantastic. Yeah, really good advice. Maybe, yeah, not get too overwhelmed at the start. I think there's so many support structures in place at university, and that's what I found too, is you turn up on your first day, no one's expecting you to know how to write academically or how to study at university, and in that first sort of semester and throughout your first year at university, there is so much support there, both from your academic department but also from the wider university. So as much as it feels like this big independent step, there's still lots of people there to support you.
The other thing I'd add, Lydia, to that,
Yes.
just very quickly, if I may, one of the,
of course.
one of the real great things about Southampton specifically is that we do have a transitions tutor. So this is a person, a dedicated member of academic staff in the school who specifically supports students when they first come to learn, because it is a transition from, A levels to studying for a degree, and there are lots of personal challenges as well around leaving home and all of those sorts of things. So yeah, we do have a dedicated person in psychology to support our students with that transition.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, that's really good point to highlight there. There's been lots of questions already, and there are still some questions coming through for students that are just wanting to make sure that they're making the right decisions right now and setting themselves up to be the perfect applicant for a psychology degree. I think personal statement top tips we have covered in some detail already. There's lots of guidance on the Unifrog platform too for students that are thinking about personal statements, but there are still some questions coming through around entry requirements for a psychology degree. Now these do vary university to university, so it's always worth checking the university's own website. But for the University of Southampton, there's two questions that are sort of coming through. One is, do you look at GCSEs at your institution for a sort of prospective student? And then also, do they need to have an A level in psychology or any specific A levels? So Sylvia, I can see you nodding along. I don't know if you want to take that one and sort of give a summary for entry.
So we don't have any specific requirements. If you come to us and you happen to have no subjects that are scientific subjects and no psychology, we expect to see AAA grades. If you would have at least one subject that would be either psychology or science, then this drops down to AAB. Now, it doesn't matter if it is psychology or science, and it doesn't matter how many. If you've got one, you're sorted. You're already in this lower grade. And that's because psychology, we treat psychology like a science. So we want to see that you cope with those modules. So if we know that you do, then we can be a little bit more lenient when we look at, you coming to us to study psychology with us. As about GCSE, I know this was a question particularly about maths. Yes, we require level 5 at the very least from maths. And that's again, because we do treat psychology as a science, which means you will have to learn statistics, so research method, data analysis. Now, for those of you who may be worried about maths, as long as you've got this fifth level at the GCSE, do not worry about this. We teach you very slowly, very step by step, very hands-on, with a lot of support. So people who come here not only learn stats, but this is my promise always, I teach stats in the first semester, and then in the second semester, and Guido here, he also does it after, he takes after me. And then there's another colleague that takes in between us. However, we all teach you in such a way that my promise to students always is you will not only learn to all of the stats that you need, but majority of you will come to like it, enjoy it. So, but yes, we have to have this minimum requirements from GCSE, and this is, as I said, level 5.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That is unfortunately all the questions we have time for today. I know there are still more coming through in the Q&A. A few of those you will be able to sort of find answers to when you if you choose to rewatch today's session, especially around personal statements and placements and pathways into clinical psychology specifically. But we do also have an email address on the screen as well that you can get in touch with if you want to find out more about studying psychology at the University of Southampton. We are also going to send an email out to you tomorrow, which will include the recording of today's session, as well as lots of links to upcoming sessions at the University of Southampton and other ways that you can engage, including open days, which I definitely encourage students to go along to as you're exploring universities. You'll get much more in-depth information. This is just a taster today around studying that particular course. You'll get to meet the academics and get a real nice feel for the university campus itself too. So that does just leave me with the final sort of, I say minute, we've run over ever so slightly, but to say thank you to all of the students that have come along today. I will send a broadcast message in a second. We've got another webinar coming up straight after this. It is to do with construction, so slightly different theme than what we've covered today. If you're keen and interested, please do stick around for that one. But a final huge thank you to all of our incredible panelists today for your time and for what has been a really informative and insightful session to our students. Good luck with the end of your studies, Chloe, and hopefully we'll see you all on another Unifrog webinar soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Please come to us at open day, ask the questions. We'll be very happy to see you.
Bye-bye.